Yes, you are welcome back to class, and this is the third lesson in the first module. The first module is Scrum, the framework, and in this lesson, we are looking at the overview of how Scrum works. Before we go further, I would like to share this with you. It's an experience of practicing Scrum even with my family. Some time ago, my daughter needed to put her room together. She needed to arrange the places properly. And she's got a lot of stuffs packed at different corners. And she'd been on that project for the sake of this conversation. I call it a project where she'd been trying to sort all those manners of things out. And it's been about 4 to 6 weeks and no much progress had been made. So one of those days I entered her room and I said, okay, let's do this. How about you list out all the items you want to do, one after the other, and let's plan it in short cycle. So she listed out all the items to put together to make the place properly tidied up. And I said, okay, let's start with the first one. And she picked the first one. And I said, okay, for this first one, what do you want to do? Then we have a quick conversation on it. And she said, I want to do this. I want to do that. Okay, then what is the first task of that first one? So with that, she was able to break down the entire room as a project into smaller tasks. And in each bit, I was able to support her to plan the work that needed to be done, and she executed it in her own terms, in her own ways. But I was there to give her the necessary support. And that exactly is how Scrum works. I want to tell you that every one of us from time to time we've adopted some of this model to execute different tasks. It could be a project, it could be a product, whatever it is, and that exactly is how Scrum works. So back to the class, I want us to have a look at the slide on the screen now and picture for one moment what this suggests to us. This is actually what Scrum is and how Scrum delivers value to the end users. I'll be walking us through this and I'll be relating with the project I just cited. I just made an illustration with my daughter to explain this. So this is exactly how Scrum works. In later classes, we would break it down further to understand some of these terms or events or meetings in Scrum. But let's just have a good overview of how Scrum works. So at this point is what the end user or the stakeholder wants. The stakeholder precisely is clear with what they want the development team to develop. So what happens next? We have a role as a PO. The PO is the product owner. The product owner engages with the stakeholder from time to time, and the product owner ensures that we have the right requirements from the stakeholder. So when that is established, that there is a requirement from the stakeholder, the product owner with the rest of the team sits together and break the entire project that needs to be developed into smaller bits. So this is the project that needs to be executed. Let's say, for instance, your stakeholder wants you to build a 2-bedroom bungalow. That is what the stakeholder wants. So the PO sit down with the development team and they put together different bits of the big block. So in a nutshell, they work together, and of course there's a Scrum Master that's ensuring that all things are done properly. So they sit together and break the requirement into smaller bits. So we have the stakeholder requirements, we have the product backlog, and the product backlog, from what we can see here, is the same as the stakeholder requirement, but broken into smaller pieces. So after this is done, there is an event, we call it the sprint planning meeting. What happens during the sprint planning meeting? At the sprint planning meeting, the entire team comes together. That's the product owner, the Scrum Master, and the development team members. They come together to pick some of these broken down pieces based on the team's capacity. So capacity is very important, and the team's availability. So the team comes together and look at the entire broken down pieces that need to be worked on and ask themselves, okay, within this period, the period between 1 to 4 weeks, of course, every team or any organization settles for a defined period. What that means is that if an organization goes with 2-week sprints or 2 weekly sprints, they stick to 2 weekly sprints all through to the end. Not this sprints, they run 2 weeks, and in another sprint they run 1 week. And what I mean by sprint is a period of work. That's what sprint means. So here we would see that they pick some pieces of task to execute, and they work on that piece within the period, and at the end of that period they come up with a product, a piece of the product. Not the entire product yet, but just a piece of that product. However, that piece of that product should be value that can be delivered, that can be demonstrated. Just in the illustration with my daughter that I mentioned, over hourly period, she was able to put together the tasks in her room, and she was able to, in 2 hours, finished a spot. In another 2 hours, finished another spot. In another 1 hour, finished another spot. So what that meant is that in each 2-hour period, she was able to deliver a value, a tangible value. So the team, that's the product owner, the Scrum Master, and the development team members, on sprint basis, that's the period, picks on what item they want to work on them, and deliver tangible value. And at the end of that period, they relate back to the stakeholder what they have been able to deliver, just as the illustration that I cited to. At every 2 hours she finished any of those tasks, she called me to say, oh, I'm done with this task, and I check, oh, you've done well, how about you do this, or how about you make some adjustments. That is exactly the same thing that happens in Scrum. So within a few period, the team works on the entire requirement from the stakeholder in iterative delivery, piling up value sprint after sprint. And this is what we mean by increments. An increment is the value being added from sprint to sprint. And after a period, the entire requirement that needed to be worked on becomes an achieved product or project that is delivered. So that, in a nutshell, is our class today. That is how Scrum works. So I want us to picture in our mind some of those tasks we on ourselves had been able to execute, had been able to deliver, had been able to adopt some of these practices, breaking big chunks into smaller bits, building a productive team around each of those tasks, and delivering them iteratively. So that would be the class for this third lesson. In the next lesson, we would be looking at the empiricism of Scrum. So if you have any question or any area you would want us to shed some light, all these that I mentioned here will still be coming across them again in other lessons where we'll break them down in details, but this is just for you to have good overview of how Scrum works. But if you have some gray areas, please reach out to me and we'll be able to discuss further about them. Thank you very much. We'll see you again in the next class.